Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I've got another acting video for you today, and this time it is all about self-tapes. I did one a couple of weeks ago all about show reels, and I'm kind of on a good steady stream now with creative ideas for acting videos. Of course, if you want to know anything or if you want me to do a specific video, then just let me know. But today it's all about self-tapes. Now, I think self-tapes are probably one of the most asked questions about in general whenever I go to a casting director workshop, if I see stuff on Twitter, or if someone DMs me a question. Most of the time self-tapes do come up. It's still quite new in the acting world. It's been around for a little while, but it is still quite new and a little bit daunting as well. Now, if you don't know what a self-tape is, a self-tape is when you do a video audition. You set the camera up like I've set my camera up now, and you record yourself doing the script that they have sent you or whatever they've asked you to do. And there's always kind of in the back of your mind thinking, am I doing this right? What are they looking for? And there are lots of question marks going around. And to be honest, when you do it, it's kind of like an actual audition. You don't really know what they're looking for. The only difference is in an actual audition where you're face to face, they can at least give you some direction, whereas a self-tape, you're pretty much left to your own devices. So I have gone through my notes from like casting director workshops, and I've also noted down things that I have learned from personal experience, and I've had a couple of questions as well on my socials, so I will dive into those near to the end of the video. So I'm going to crack straight on with this video. Okay, so the first things I'm going to talk about are how to go about putting a self-tape together. So the first thing is to prepare. Normally, if you've got an agent or if they email you directly, they will tell you what to do. They will either send through a script or they will ask you to do some improvised stuff. It totally depends on the project. Now, don't freak out and think you've got to go about this differently from a normal audition. A self-tape is just another audition, but you've got to really still be working hard at the script, really look into it, use all of the things that you would normally do when you were analysing a script. Most of the time, like an actual audition, they will expect you to learn the piece, but what I always do is I will have an extra script on copy just a little way away from me. I won't normally be holding it because sometimes I feel like my eyes are just drawn down to my script, and normally just have it to the side. And it's a bit of a safety blanket, but also I can glance over at it if I need to, and it's not overly obvious that I'm looking at a script. But really make sure that you try and learn it as best as you can. But once you feel like you have got the scene down, you know what you're doing, it's time to actually set about getting everything set up to film. Most of the time you will need a reading partner. Now, if you have someone in your household who doesn't mind having their voice on camera and doesn't sound really flat and monotonous, then go for it, use them. Now obviously you don't want them to be trying too hard to like outshine you. Just make sure you got a reader who is objective, who sounds like they could be fitting into the scene as much as you can. Now obviously some people might be living by themselves, or they may not have access to someone, especially at a time like this. So there are a couple of ways you can go about that. If you can't get a family member or an acting buddy to come in and read for you, there are actually sites that you can use where someone will team up with you and they will record their lines. And sometimes you can also do it like via video chat. That is what is happening quite a lot at the moment, seeming as we are all stuck at home and we can't really go around to our mate's house to help them out. So a lot of the time now, a lot of actors are video calling their friends and getting them involved to read for them. If you really need to, you can record your own voice saying it back to you. I don't think that really matters, especially now because it is so difficult to get people. And if you really need to go and do that, then that's totally fine too. Now, when it comes to actually shooting it, you will need some sort of camera. You can use your phone, that's totally fine. I have just got a little point and shoot. I've got the Canon G7X Mark II. blue, and that is really, really good. Don't freak out and try and think you have to go and buy a really expensive camera, because you don't. You really don't need to. When you shoot it in landscape, how I'm shooting now, how you're watching this now on YouTube. Do not shoot it in portrait. I've been there, I've done that. I've learnt the hard way, and now a lot of casting directors will make that quite obvious. They will say, please don't shoot in portrait, because when they're viewing it, they're obviously just seeing it like that, and they're normally viewing it on their computer, not always on their phone. So try and shoot it in landscape if you can. Now, when it comes to a background, try and have a plain background. That's ideal. Obviously, this is not ideal if you were shooting a self-tape. But if you have got a plain wall that you can use in your house, then that is great. If you don't, then have a little look at backdrops. I have a backdrop for my self-tapes, and it is so good, and it was so worth the money. It is a double-sided one, and normally when casting directors want you to shoot a self-tape, some of them prefer to have you standing in front of a blue background or a dark grey background. That's because those colours don't wash skin colour out, whereas white, a bit like the walls behind me, they can actually wash your skin colour out, and obviously you want to be looking as flattering as possible on camera. So something like a blue or a grey background is great. Obviously if you can paint a wall in your house, that's fantastic. You can also buy like really big pieces of card from places like The Range, This Works, things like that, but you can't get them online. So if at the moment you're stuck in your house and you can't get out because obviously the shops are not open, then it might be worth actually investing in a backdrop. I have got one, I will link it down below. It was just under 50 quid, but I found that actually investing in things like that have been totally worth it, and I use money from jobs. I actually keep a little aside for things like that, for lighting equipment, sound. If I want to update anything, I have a little pot there just so I can use it for that. Now, sound is probably one of the most important things when it comes to shooting a self-tape. Obviously, the casting director wants to hear you, wants to know what you're saying. If they can't hear you, then you're scuppered basically. So most of the time, something like what I'm shooting on right now, a camera that's got a built-in mic, normally is okay, because they normally have quite good sound quality. However, if you really kind of want to improve your sound game a little bit, then try and have a look at getting a mic. So there are various different ones you can get. You can get the little clip-on ones that they have on film sets, and also for like TV interviews. You can also get a mic that is actually attached to the camera, and I've heard that the Rode mics are really, really good. So that's something to look into. And also as well, if you've got like a separate mic, like a Yeti mic, the really big like standalone ones, then those are really great too. But don't stress yourself about spending a lot of money on a mic. Just kind of see what works for you. For instance, when I filmed this, I don't actually have a mic on me, and I'm quite happy with the sound quality. It's just if you're really muffled, or if you feel like the room you're in is really echoey, that's another point. Don't shoot in a room that is really echoey, because that really plays havoc on the sound. Also, if you do have someone reading with you when you're doing your self-tape, try to make sure that they're not too loud. Sometimes this can be because they're trying too hard, but also it can be because they're sitting too close to the camera. And what happens is you watch it back and their voice is much louder than your voice. So try and come to some sort of setup where either they're a little bit further away or they're speaking a little bit quieter. Now, lighting is the other really important thing. As well as obviously wanting to be able to hear you, the casting director will want to see you. And if you're in a really poorly lit room where, for instance, the light source is coming like from directly above you, you're going to get some really ugly shadows on your face, let me tell you. So obviously the first source of light you can use is natural light, like it is behind me. Try and set up where you're in front of a window, you've got some lovely natural light. That's probably the best lighting to use. If, however, you don't have access to natural light, or if you are shooting at night, for instance, then try and have a look at getting some softbox lighting or a ring light. I have a ring light, and it's honestly changed my lighting game so much. Before this, I had a tiny weeny little softbox light, which, to be honest, didn't really do much. So try and have a little look at some. So this one I think isn't too expensive. I think it was around the £70 odd mark. I'm not sure because this was a gift, but I had been looking at them before. And also you can get softbox lighting. Now softbox lighting sort of around the same price for a ring light, and what happens is you normally will get maybe 2 lights in a set, and they're essentially big square lights, and they have their own stands, and you might put one on this side of you and one on this side of you. It helps kind of even out the lighting on both sides. To be honest, I think it just depends on what works for you. So for instance, I don't have a lot of space, so the ring light was the great option because I get a lot of light and it only takes up a small amount of space. Whereas softbox lighting, if you've got a couple, they can be quite bulky, and so just kind of think about where you live, what the practicalities are of storing them. Okay, so now you are ready to film. The first thing you need to think about is a slate. Now I've actually got a question which I will answer later on about slating, but I'll just cover the basics of slating. So a slate is basically a little introduction. It's just so they know who is filming this self-tape, so they can match it up with their records with who they have asked to cast for this, or if you are submitting it, if it's like an open self-tape audition, then they can just make a note of your details. If you've been to a in-person audition and you have been asked to do a slate, it is pretty much the same thing as that. They will normally ask you for your name, maybe your age, your agent, and then they might ask for a couple of other details like where do you live, or it could be anything, to be honest. It will all be in the email when it is sent to you. Sometimes they'll also ask for something like a full body shot so they can see what you look like in full, and they might also ask for your profile. So your profiles are basically the profiles of your face. So you might be asked to turn to the side, turn to the other side, and back. And that's it, that's all you need to do. Also as well, they might ask to see your hands depending on what the role's for, and all you need to do is do something like that, just making sure that you've got all your digits, and also if you've got any kind of crazy scars or anything on your hands. They're just kind of getting a picture of who you are. So when it comes to actually dressing for your show reel, the same sort of thing applies to, again, if you're going to an in-person audition and they will be recording you. Try not to wear anything too crazy. Do not wear stripes because it makes the camera go absolutely nuts. Don't do that. If you want to, you can wear something that hints towards the character. I quite like to do this because it kind of gets me in the mood. Obviously, do not go full costume. I know some people do, and if that floats your boat, then fine. But normally casting directors are not necessarily looking for you to go out and hire a costume for this. So wear something that hints towards your character. If it doesn't really matter what you wear, if the character is kind of very much like you maybe, then try and wear something like denim or a blue or a green, because again, same thing. They help to really bring out the colour of your skin, makes you look healthier and not washed out. So that's just a little pro tip. And that's also what I do when I get my headshots. I know it's a little off track, but I try and wear something that's blue or green. Then you can just go for it and record your self-tape. Now this is the joy of self-tapes, a little bit like when I film YouTube videos. I can edit stuff. If I have a really crappy self-tape, I'll just do it again. I don't need to go, oh, I'm really sorry, can I start again? Because they're not there. You can do it as many times as you like. I find try not to do it too many times, because then you can really start to overthink it. Do it a couple of times, watch it back, see if you feel comfortable with the read that you have done. Now, this is a little tip for if the script is very action-based, and I do get questions about this. So basically, if the script is very much to do with actions and not as much dialogue, then feel free to actually act it out and move about. The rest of the time, just sit or stand and just stay and do the lines, because sometimes things can get a little bit too distracting. And to be honest, the casting director just wants to see your face and how you can act. It doesn't really matter how well you pick up a glass of water or take a phone call and have the phone in your hand. They want to see how you act in your face. If it's obviously very movement orientated, then they're going to be looking more for that. But if it's more dialogue driven, then just keep it simple. Going back to what I just said about sitting or standing, don't be afraid to stand. I think a lot of people think they should be sitting, but if you feel like the character should be standing, then stand. Obviously don't move about and do loads of crazy stuff. But if you feel like the scene that you're doing, you feel more comfortable standing, then do it. Don't worry about it. Then when you're happy that you've done a really good self-tape, it's time to edit it. To be honest, what I do is I don't actually do a lot of editing. I will just get the clip of me doing my slate, and then I will pop my scene next to it so it's all one video. And I don't bother actually cutting stuff out. I prefer to have one long run of me doing the self-tape. I think it looks a bit like you've made loads of mistakes if you start editing out loads of stuff. So just to keep it simple, same thing as what I said with the read. Then once you have edited it, it is time to send it off. So a couple of things: try to keep the file size down, especially if this is a role that you know a lot of people are taping for. Imagine the casting director's computer, okay? And let's say 100 people send over a self-tape, and each self-tape is something like 500 meg to a gig, okay? Then that's easily, if it's all 1 gig, that's easily 100 gig in a day, and their computers won't be able to cope with that. So try and keep the file size down. It won't actually distort the quality, it is just reducing the file size so it's easier to store. So I try and keep mine down to maximum 100 megabytes, because then it's easier to send and it's easy for them to store on their computer. Also, export it into an MP4. That's the most common file format that they will be looking at, and also it runs on Macs, PCs, everything. They don't have to worry about converting it. Most of the time, most editing softwares will export to MP4, but just have a little look at that just in case yours doesn't. And then you can send it off. Normally they will say how they would like you to send it. Most of the time I use WeTransfer because it means that they can download it whenever they want to. Some people use Dropbox, some people use Castit, I think, and also Casting Networks, I think that happens on there too. But have a little read of the email that they have sent just so you know what they want you to do. And then that's it. You've done your self-tape. Forget about it, move on to the next thing. Don't dwell on it too much. So I'm going to quickly go over a couple of tips, and then I'm going to answer some questions that came in on my Instagram. Okay, so the first tip is don't be afraid to do a couple of different versions and send a couple of different versions. For instance, if the character is maybe a couple of lines in a TV show, then feel free to send over a couple of versions because the scene's already going to be quite short. Also, it shows that you're trying to show the casting director what you can do, and also it's able to show them maybe different versions of the character that they may not have thought about. And there's no harm in doing it, especially if they are short scenes. If it's a really long scene, I'd maybe not do that, but if they are short scenes, then feel free to send off a couple of different versions. My other little tip is to read everything they send you, and I really mean everything. If they sent you a script and part of it has been slightly crossed out because they don't want you to do that bit of the script, read it. You never know what you might find hidden. Little clues to do with the character, maybe something that's previously happened to them. If you don't know that, just read everything. And also all the bits that they send you, try and read that as well, because you never know what you might find. The casting directors want to help you get the part if you are right for the part. So really use all the resources that they have given you, and make sure you do your research as well of the project, who's involved, director, all that sort of thing. Okay, so a couple of questions that came in are these. So the first one is about slating, about what I had said about before, about doing a little introduction before you do your self-tape. So some casting directors will ask for a slate and some won't. So what do you do when they don't ask you? I do one anyway because they are very handy for a casting director to know, especially if they click on a clip and they're not sure who it is. They'll hear you saying your name right from the get-go, and also if they can't remember your name, for instance, if they've seen your self-tape and they thought, oh, that one was really good, and they can't remember which one it was, they might click through and remember you from your slate. So I just do one anyway, just for safety. And when I do, I will just say my name, my agent, and also the character that I'm reading for as well. Another little tip comes to actually naming your file name of your self-tape. Now what I do is I will put my name, and then I will also put the character name for who I am reading for. Don't send your self-tape with like MOV 135, because they're gonna be like, who is this? They want to know who you are, and it is really helpful for them if you actually name your file after you have edited it. Now this is another question to do with actually editing your self-tape. Should you edit self-tapes or send it in one take even if you make a mistake? So I think it's totally okay to send a self-tape in one take if the mistake is small. If you really like mess it up, then I would just refilm it. I wouldn't even bother, because you want to show yourself off in the best possible light, and I think it's better to do that. But then as I said, I don't think you should like edit out all your mistakes. Try and have your actual read through of the script as one take. So try and choose your best take from all the ones that you have filmed. Next question is about stage directions. I think what I've said has already sort of answered this. Do I need to move around and enter exit shot? Oh, I'll say about that actually. I wouldn't enter or exit shot. I would just start off on screen. Don't waste time doing that because that might be the time that the casting director clicks off of your self-tape. You want to start straight away. And I find that as well, I try and keep it so that the read through starts kind of straight away after my slates. I might leave a couple of seconds in, especially if there's like emotional stuff going on. I try and give it a little bit of a couple of seconds just to ease ourselves into it instead of going wham straight into it. But yeah, I would suggest, if you are, as I said about the action-based thing, if it's very action-based, then feel free to enter, exit, you know, film the action bits. But if you're just doing a read through, then just stay where you are and stay there for the whole thing. Okay, it's the last question. This is about props. So if there is a prop mentioned, should I use the prop, especially if it's relevant to the lines? I would, if it's not obtrusive. Like for instance, if it's a phone, that's fine. I think if it's something ridiculously obscure, then just mime it. To be honest, again, they're not really looking for how you hold a phone, how you hold a book, you know, all that sort of thing. They're looking for your acting going on here, okay, not your mime skills. There we go. Those are my tips on self-tapes. I really hope you enjoyed this, that you found it helpful. Obviously, if you've got any more questions, just let me know. I know that self-tapes can be really daunting, especially if it's your first one. Just try not to overthink it and just treat it like any other audition, and just try to be a bit more relaxed as well, because you've not got those waiting room nerves that you might get. You can just set it up and film it and do it as many times as you need to. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new, please do subscribe and give this video a like if you liked it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Oh, that made me jump.